Welcome back to the Coaching Revolution podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to share and break down three really big and important lessons that I learned in 2025. Lessons that I learned and earned mostly because of some really tough things and disappointments that happened over this last year. And that's because so many beautiful lessons in life come from the harder moments, if you're willing to be aware and intentional about it all. And these are also lessons that I think you'll really appreciate. And my hope is that you're going to learn a lot for yourself from these lessons that I've learned. This is the first new episode that I'm recording in the new year in 2026, and it's also the first episode of the 2026 season of the Coaching Revolution podcast. So I hope that you had a really beautiful and meaningful and restful holiday season over these last weeks, and I am so grateful that you're back here in the new year with me. I don't take it for granted, not even for one moment, that you are devoting your precious time and energy to this podcast. It means so, so much to me. Thank you. And I'm coming back to you and the podcast excited and refreshed. I really needed the 5 or 6 weeks that I took off from podcast creation. And I also needed the couple of weeks inside of those 5 or 6 weeks that I took off from work completely. And I took off from being online completely. I will tell you that. By the time the beginning of December 2025 rolled around last month, I was feeling pretty tired. And thankfully, now I am returning back to the podcast with more energy and more creativity. And I really can't wait to share today's episode with you. It's a personal one. And as I said, it's about some of the things that unfolded and unfurled for me personally and professionally in 2025 and what I learned from them. And as always, this episode, I'm being very real and honest, even about the really tough things. And let me tell you, there were a lot of tough moments in 2025. And of course, the biggest one was my mother dying last April. But even aside from how big that has been, there have also been quite a few other tough moments in 2025. Moments where I felt like I was really on the struggle bus. Moments of struggle as a mother, moments of struggle as a daughter and as a sister, moments of struggle as a friend, moments of struggle as an entrepreneur, and lots of internal struggle with myself too. There were a lot of doozies last year, and doozies specifically related to me and my life, but also, of course, 2025 was a hard time in the collective, in the world. Lots of heartache. I don't know about you, but for me, I cried or raged while reading the news a lot of times. So, if 2025 for you had a lot of notable tough moments, whether they were personal or in the collective, what was happening in current events, whatever it is, please know you are not alone. One thing that I've come to count on is that life isn't only the happy and the joyous, but it's also the grief and the messy. And to be human is to experience all of it. The grief in life is almost always right there on top of the joy, which is always right there on top of the grief, which is always right there on top of the joy, and so on and so forth. It is all of the things. That being said, 2025 also for me had a lot of not just tough moments, but a lot of joy and beauty and meaning inside of all of it. 2025 was the year that we adopted Willa, our doggie. We adopted her right before she turned 8 years old. I think she's a pit bull and lab mix. She's some kind of mix. I'm not exactly sure what. But she is exactly what I wanted. She is such a big ball of love and affection. And now that Yael, my younger daughter, is just about a tween, she's going to be 12 in April, and she's not always wanting to cuddle with me anymore. Willa, our dog, has been exactly what I've needed. 2025 was also the year that Panina, my older daughter, got into her first choice of college, and I am beaming with pride and excitement for her, along with a good dose of my grieving mama heart because I'm going to have to let her go come this August. In 2025, I also reached most of my business goals, which I feel really proud of, considering how the industry has been. And by the way, just because I reached most of my business goals, that doesn't mean that all of it was unicorns and roses on the business front. I'm going to be sharing some of what didn't go so well in just a few minutes as part of some of the lessons. The other really great thing about 2025 for me was that I had a lot of social time with a lot of different friends, and that brought me so much joy. Plus, at the end of the year, I finally got to see the redwoods in California. And that's something that's been on my bucket list since I've been a teenager. And let me tell you, the redwoods did not disappoint. They were even more magical than I had imagined. So while there was a lot of tough in 2025, there's also really a lot for me to be grateful for from this last year, uh, even amongst all of the challenges. So the three lessons that I'm going to share with you today, these are lessons that are really important and meaningful to me. They're hard-earned wisdom that I have a feeling are going to serve me for a very long time to come. And I'm sharing them with you because I hope that they're going to give you inspiration and motivation and maybe even some valuable strategy to take for yourself into this new year. There have been so many lessons this last year, probably more than I would even like. But for today, I picked some of the most salient ones. And I'll just tell you right now, as we get into them, nothing I'm going to share with you on the episode today is completely innovative. Exactly. It's stuff that I kind of already knew, and it's stuff that you probably already know as well. But that being said, it's also things that I needed to understand, digest, metabolize, and really get to know on a much deeper level. And these lessons, as I got to understand them on a much deeper level, they got way more profound and alive for me. And I hope that's what will happen for you as you listen along. So let's dive in. Very first lesson, I'm just going to get into it and say to sum it up, the lesson is cheaper isn't always better. So, to give you the fuller story on this one, we kind of have to rewind way back to when I was a little girl. So, I'm going to start with this. I'm the daughter of two immigrants who came to this country with nothing but the clothing on their backs. My mother came to the United States when she was 15 in 1959, and my father came to the States when he was 20 in 1965. And both of them separately with their parents, they were both only children. When they both came here, they were poor as mice. And like many immigrants who come to this country, neither of them knew English when they arrived here. And I will also say to this day, my father's accent is still so thick that it sounds like he did just arrive. And my mother's accent was pretty thick too. Because my parents are immigrants, my family did things differently than other families did when I was growing up. And I often felt different from my friends and their families. Different for big things and little things. Little things like the foods we ate at home. I actually never once had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich until I was 16 years old and at a friend's house. Just never, it was not something that my family ate in the house. And then I also felt different from my friends and their families for much bigger things. It just felt like the way that I moved through the world was different. Anyway, I mention all of this because, like many immigrants, my parents also worked very hard to make a life here in the US. And I mean, they really worked. And on top of that, they watched their spending like hawks. They watched their spending very carefully so that really my sister and I could have a much better life than they had. My parents were so focused on saving money that they skimped on a lot of things that they deemed unnecessary. And for me, growing up, looking for bargains and really we only ever spent money on bargains. This was one of the credos in the household, bargain or bust. And maybe the one exception to this was education. My parents really, really valued education. They understood how important it was, and school and education were always top priority. So, anyway, until I was in my 20s, this bargain or bust, this really watching spending, this looking for the cheapest thing was strongly in effect. So until I was in my 20s, I mostly wore either hand-me-down clothing or knockoff clothing from brands. It was really embarrassing in middle school to show up with knockoff Champion sweatshirts and knockoff Ked sneakers. I felt like everybody knew that I didn't have the real thing. Another example, my first Barbie doll that I got was also a knockoff. It wasn't truly a Barbie doll. And I remember being so sad because she definitely looked different than the other Barbie dolls. When I went away to college and I was living on my own, separate from my parents, I took the bargain mentality with me. I took that bargain or bust credo with me. And I can remember all of the times where I'd be hanging out with friends and notice that they didn't have to think about too much if they wanted to buy little luxuries for themselves, even things like a Snapple iced tea, right? We'd all be on a walk, walking from one part of campus to another. A friend would get thirsty, they'd stop in a bodega, they'd buy iced tea. Whereas for me, it didn't matter how thirsty I would not buy the drink at the bodega. I would wait and I would stay thirsty until I got back to my apartment or my dorm room, and then I'd have some tap water. And, this was in the late 1990s when I was in college. Snapple was probably less than $2 at the time. I had the money, but I just wouldn't spend on it. And As I got older, I did definitely loosen up around the bargain thing a little bit. I graduated from hand-me-downs and knockoff clothing. I started shopping at J. Crew, Anthropology, though I'd never ever consider buying anything high fashion. It wasn't really even that important to me. But also, I would never consider buying any article of clothing that wasn't on sale. And to this day, and I'm 50 years old now, I am very, very certain that I've actually never ever bought an article of clothing for myself that wasn't on sale. I have bought for my kids here and there, but not for me. And, honestly, I'm pretty proud of that. Because it's not such a big value of mine to have, highly fashionable clothing. I also don't buy clothing or really any stuff, objects, things. I don't buy things very often outside of food and toiletries. And I do buy a lot of books. I will say that. But the not buying a lot of stuff, it's not only because of that immigrant bargain and low spending mentality. Some of it is because I just don't believe in buying too much stuff because I don't think it's good for the environment to buy things so much. And also, I just can't stand clutter in my house. But anyway, I diverge. Let me get back on track about the cheaper isn't always better lesson. I promise I am getting to sharing with you a huge business fail that happened around all of this in 2025. But first, there's one more background thing to know about how I spend money. As I've gotten older, I definitely now splurge on myself on a few things. I've worked really diligently the last few decades and I've been financially successful. And so I do kind of force myself sometimes to take more pleasure in the money that I've earned and spend it. So, for example, I love, love, love getting massages and really any kind of body work. And I do get massages and body work pretty regularly, a couple times a month. I don't get them in fancy spa-like places. I just go to really, really good practitioners who are very reasonably priced, but I do spend there. I also value organic food and high quality supplements. Health and well-being are big priorities for me. And so I'll spend whatever I need to spend on those things. Really, anything where it comes to health, I am gonna to buy top quality. And also, of course, I also know the importance of really stellar and exceptional transformational coaches and practitioners. And I have always, always been very willing to spend on coaches and practitioners, whether it comes to my business, my self-development, etc. Though I will be honest, there are some practitioners out there that charge what I think is astronomical amounts of money, like really a lot of money. And I know I could never bring myself to spend that much. Some of it is that immigrant inside of me for sure, but most of it is just that it seems a bit excessive to me, or I should say excessive for me. And what I mean by that is I don't judge other people if they charge what I sense or what I feel is astronomical. It's like different strokes for different folks. It's just not my jam, not as a consumer and also not as a business owner. I've always kept my pricing on my coaching and my programming much lower than other folks out there who have half as much experience and mastery that I have, whose programs aren't maybe as effective as mine. And that's just because charging really, really high prices, it just never appealed to me. It just never did anything for me. Anyway, all of that being said, the part of me that is the daughter of poor schnook immigrants still can be very much alive inside of me. And honestly, because of it, I do still deny myself sometimes reasonable things that I might want, even when I can absolutely afford them. I don't do this all the time, but it still does come up sometimes. And related to all of this, there is definitely a part of me that still is always looking for a bargain, even though I sometimes know better. Even if I know better, sometimes there's a part of me that still believes that cheaper is better. And unfortunately, that part of me, the part of me that's always looking for cheaper, that's always looking for a bargain, it led me down a kind of hellacious road this last year inside of my business when it came to a big project that we were working on inside of the business, a project to refresh my website and choose a new CRM. For those of you that don't know CRM, I don't even know what it stands for, but it's the software that sends out emails. So there were so many lessons for me and my team inside of this website refresh and this shift to the new CRM. And at some point, I've already written about it all before. I think in the autumn, I sent a newsletter about some of the things, but even more lessons about all of this have surfaced. And hopefully, at some point, I'll do a full podcast episode on everything that I learned through this terrible, terrible technology mishap. But I'm not quite ready to do that yet because the truth is that I'm still cleaning up the massive, massive mess that I got into, and not all of the lessons have fully surfaced. And I am still kind of raw about all of it. But for today's episode, I know that it will be valuable. So I want to share this. I want to share about the cheaper isn't always better piece. So this all started, this whole refresh idea, website refresh idea started because I was working with a marketing guy who, the truth is, I didn't really totally trust him in the first place. And that's another lesson here. Listen to my inner knowing about people. Of course, I know this, but sometimes I forget. But anyway, this marketing guy recommended that I do a website refresh because my old website didn't express fully the incredible amount of free content that I offer as well as it could. And the old website also didn't easily share information on all of the incredible live events that I offer. It also just didn't offer an easy pathway for visitors to really immerse themselves in my universe, to really get who I am, to learn from all of the free things that I have to share. And so this marketing consultant wanted me to change up the website design because while the design was super pretty, I loved that old website design so much. The truth is that it was overly designed, and overly designed was actually distracting from my actual messaging. He also wanted me to do things like add upcoming events in various places on the website, since I do so many live events. And because when people are live with me, they really get hooked. He wanted me to offer more of my free resources. I have all of these free resources, and I wasn't really sharing about all of them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There were a lot of kinds of changes that he suggested I make. And I did think that some of his ideas had merit, and I wanted to switch up some of the things on the website. But because I had never really considered my website to be a major marketing asset in my business, and because I don't like to spend money, I didn't really want to spend a lot of money on this project. My inner daughter of an immigrant part inside of me completely backed up this idea to not spend too much money on the website refresh and to look for a bargain. But let me tell you, I see now, after so much heartache, this was actually a situation where cheaper was absolutely the wrong way to go. So because I was looking for a bargain, I hired a graphic designer that I already knew, who I thought she was okay. I definitely did not think she was spectacular, but I hired her because she was way, way cheaper than most other people. And I'm a little embarrassed to share all of this because it really was such a disaster. But I will tell you that this cheap graphic designer, along with, I also made the mistake of hiring a developer who was cheaper, who turned out to be a dud. All of these things, they ended up costing me, and I'm not exaggerating right now, they ended up costing me thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars in having to go back and correct all of the mistakes that were made, in having to deal with all of the glitches of the final product that just weren't getting fixed, in having launches this autumn where not all of the opt-ins were working, where not all of the technology was working, where the checkout pages stopped working at certain points. It cost me so much money on team hours because of all of the chaos that ensued. And not to mention part of the fallout of going cheaper, looking for the bargain, has been so many headaches and worries, frustrations. It has taken so much of my extra time and energy, like really from August through December. It just took up so much extra time and energy. And I know that this is part of what contributed to me just feeling so exhausted by the end of the autumn. I will tell you that this website refresh, along with the CRM change, it has been, I'm going to call it, it has been the biggest fail and the biggest mess that I have experienced in all of the 25 years that I've been in business. And in the end, it has been by far the most costly mistake that I've made, by far. And like I said earlier, I'm still not done cleaning it up. There are many parts of my website that are still malfunctioning. This is a thing that we are working on right now. And I'll tell you, I'm trying to have a lot of compassion with myself for making these bad decisions because I was looking for the cheaper route. I know that the looking for the cheaper route is a protection mechanism, right? To want to look for bargains, even when I know inside of me it's probably a bad idea. It's to protect myself. And I really do have so much love for that part of myself who is like the immigrant, who feels scared and othered and worries that everything is gonna just fall apart tomorrow, etc., etc. I'm trying to spin it like the good news about all of this is that the whole situation was so awful that it can only get better from here. So for me, the moral of the story is that while it is a good thing to save, it's a very good thing to save. I will always be a saver. And while it is a very good thing to be mindful and discerning with spending, I will always be mindful and discerning with spending. All that being said, you also want to make sure that your fears about spending aren't running the show so that you don't pick the cheap option just for the sake of it being cheaper. Because the cheap option might end up biting you in the butt. Now, again, I know that this is obvious. I know, like I said earlier, this is something that we all know, but it's a lesson that I have metabolized because of everything that's happened these last months, that I've metabolized so much more deeply in ways that I've really needed to. So I'm never going to be a frivolous spender, and I doubt I'll ever be someone who's big into luxury or pick like the luxury brand or anything like that. Neither of those things are in my nature. That's what's right for me personally. But I also no longer see myself as scrappy or needing to be scrappy or needing to always look for the bargain, even despite the bad quality of some of the bargains. I want to say this again because this is a real identity shift for me, and it may resonate for some of you. I didn't even realize until all of this how scrappy I saw myself as. And this, for me, it's like a leveling up in my self-identity in a way, knowing that I deserve quality. And, you know, there are other places where I've known I deserve quality, but even more so now, it really is an important shift in identity for me. I will say that the other side lesson from all of this is that even though I've always known that my business is really solid, I've known that it's really solid both in terms of infrastructure as well as in terms of quality product and customer loyalty. This tech disaster with so many things going wrong, it was the ultimate test of all of it. I mean, it tested so much. My business could have fallen apart truly from all of this tech breakdown. And I'm just so, so proud to know that while this kind of tech breakdown might have caused other coaching businesses to shut down, my business has been so solid that it ultimately thrived through all of it. Um, we had a pretty good year in 2025, even with all of this chaos. Okay, so this brings us to lesson number two. My second lesson that I want to share with you from this last year is don't take launches so seriously while they're happening and instead cackle a little bit like the crone when you're inside of a launch. Now, I'll explain in a few minutes what I mean by the crone and the cackle part, but let me give you some context first. So, this is another one of those lessons that I have known for a long time, and it dropped in even more deeply for me this year. So, my business, Applied Depth Institute, is, for better or worse, a launch-based business. So, what does that mean? So, because I don't have open-ended, evergreen, rolling admission programs where anyone can join the program all year round, and instead I have programs that mostly have a definitive start date and have a definitive end date. Because of that, I'm kind of married to launching my programs, having kind of big launches for my programs, versus with an evergreen or rolling admission program, you can do a little promotion here and a little promotion there, because it's kind of like all year round. Now, there's a part of me that wishes I didn't have a launch-based business. There's a part of me that doesn't wish it because I actually do love the excitement of launches, but sometimes it just seems like, oh, it'd be so much easier if there didn't have to be so many launches. And I'll tell you, for years, I've been kind of looking for an alternative to this. I've been trying to figure out specifically, is there a way for me to make the Sacred Depths Transformational Practitioner Training a rolling admission program? And I'll share with you, and this is a little bit, I'm diverging a little bit from the lesson about launches, but just because I think it will be helpful, I'm just going to share, so far I haven't been able to figure it out. Ethically, so far, I haven't found a way because Sacred Depths is a training and it feels so important in the training for people to start at a certain point and then go through a very specific journey and for it to be live training too. I'm very much into live training. I think part of it is because I'm so in love with my content. I love teaching it over and over again. Not so much from like the teaching point, though I do love that, but more because it always creates such ahas and breakthroughs and openings for my students that I like to be there and see the look on their faces and hear the shares and all that comes through as they learn it. So I'm kind of like addicted to that. Anyway, I'm not in the rolling admission business right now. My business is launch based for the time being. Maybe one day I'll figure it out differently, but for the time being, my business is launch based. And now here's the other thing. And this is where we start getting to the lesson here about not taking launches so seriously. My launches, my program launches, pretty much never, ever, ever unfold the way I want them to unfold. So you might be wondering, well, Joanna, how do you want your launches to unfold? I'll tell you, it's probably the way most entrepreneurs want their launches to unfold, which is that from the moment you open the cart and start promoting, there are just people flying in, and you already know that the launch is just going to be extraordinary, that you're going to hit all of your numbers and beyond from day one. Doesn't that sound like a dream? Doesn't that sound amazing? I do see some people posting on social media that their launches are perfect and seamless and totally amazing from the get-go. And honestly, sometimes I wonder if those people are maybe fibbing a little bit because for me, that is just not how it has ever been. Instead, my launches, like much of my life, are messy. Yeah, sometimes lots of people step in right away, but even then, There's usually a lull in the middle of the launch, and that can feel excruciating. And then it'll maybe pick up towards the end of the launch when folks realize that the special pricing is ending. Or in other launches, sometimes I'll put out emails and for a bit, I'm just holding my breath for someone to buy. It's like crickets in the beginning. I mean, complete and total and utter crickets. And then maybe it's not until the third or fourth or fifth email that we start to see movement happening. Other times I'll do a preview call for a program and I'll get off of that preview call and I'll feel great and I'll think that tons of people are going to register that day for the special bonus that I offered for that day. And then it's just like little drips on that day. And I have to hold my breath again. And it's not until a few days later that more people register. And on and on and on. There's been so many different scenarios, but at the end of the day, the thing that I want you to get from this is that it never looks like the ideal scenario that I wanted it to look like. Period. End of story. The one exception to this is my alumni programs. So I can almost always count someone who has already been through sacred depths when it comes time to sharing the next program. They're all going to step in pretty quickly for the most part. And I always am just so, so grateful for that. And so, anyway, my launches are messy. My launches are touch and go. My launches don't unfold the way that I wanted them to necessarily unfold. But here's the thing. No matter how messy or touch and go my launches are, they always work out in the end. And when I say that they always work out in the end, what I mean is that most of the time I reach my registrant goals or even exceed them. Sometimes we even end up with more people than I was going for. But there's some times when I don't quite reach my goals. And over the course of my business career, there have been one or two times where things just went so sideways that I canceled a program. And guess what? I'm still here. I haven't burst into flames just because a launch wasn't rainbows and unicorns, just because it was touch and go, just because it didn't unfold the way that I thought it would. I'm still here. My children still love me most of the time. The sun still rises. And my business doesn't burst into flames when a launch doesn't go in the way that I thought it would. It's a disappointment for sure, but life goes on pretty much exactly as it was before. And by the way, it's the same for when I do hit my numbers or exceed my numbers. I'm still me. My life is still my life with all of its beauty and all of its frustrations. The numbers don't really change that much. The how it goes, if it was touch and go, if people didn't come in right away and then they did come in, right? It just it's all still there. So I understand all of this now after 25 years of launching because I've executed so many launches and I can see that these are how the cycles go. At some point, I'm going to take the time to actually count up how many launches there have been because there have been so many big launches, small launches, long launches, short launches. And again, from this perspective, from this vantage point, I can look back over all of those launches, all of those years, and I can see so, so clearly that the way that my launches work is that they're messy in terms of what to expect day by day, play by play. They're unpredictable of if people are going to come in the beginning or the middle or the end or, this, that, and the other thing. That's how it goes for me. That's my process. And, just side note, of course, I can get better and better at trying to predict some things, right? The more you look at data, the more you know what levers to pull, what messages work, what bonuses work, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm still working towards all of that. But the truth is, some of it is also just how it goes, right? You can't control all of the things. So anyway, I know that my launches are messy and that in the end, even with the mess, it all still works out in the end, one way or another. And yet, even though I know this, and I have known this for, I'd say the last 3, 4 years, until about a year or two ago, I didn't really understand this deep in my bones. And because I didn't really understand this deep in my bones, inevitably, I would get either depressed or anxious as soon as a launch would get started if I wouldn't see people immediately coming in. Or I'd get really down if people didn't buy right away after a preview event. I'd go for whatever reason, right? Name the launch 10 different reasons. I'd go into a kind of catastrophic emergency feeling, totally forgetting in the moment that my launches in the end usually work out just fine. And I'd go into the catastrophic emergency feelings. I'd ride the roller coaster of the launch, of the ups and downs, of the touch and go, when really what I should have been doing inside of those launches is remembering the bigger picture, remembering that it's okay for things to be messy or to not unfold the way that I had envisioned exactly them unfolding. But over this last year in 2025, something around all of this really started to deeply shift inside of me. I finally learned the lesson. And this actually even started, I started to notice this already in 2024. Already in 2024, I stopped going into emergency mode inside of launches for the most part. But even more so over this last year. And what I realize now is that after all the years of seeing the cycles and the phases of the launches play out, that I can trust more in the cycles and the phases of the launches. And my launches in 2025, almost all of them were pretty successful by the time we got to the end. There was one that wasn't, and if I'm honest with myself, I didn't put enough effort into it. But anyway, my point for right now is that I've started to take what I call a crone approach and attitude to my launches once I'm in them. So, what is the crone approach and attitude to launches? Well, the crone, she's older, she's experienced, she's seen a lot of life. She's seen it all. She's seen the cycles and the phases and the cycles and the phases. And the crone knows that life is filled with triumph and with disappointment, and that not everything unfolds or turns out the way that you thought it would. And from seeing it all and seeing so much of it over the years, the crone knows that that's okay. The crone has seen so many launches and all of the weird and messy ways that it unfolds. And she actually knows that it's all kind of funny in a way, right? That when things go wrong or when you get crickets, you can cackle at it. It can be funny because you don't have to take it all so seriously. It doesn't have to be an immediate emergency, or at any point, it doesn't necessarily have to be an emergency. The crone inside of me knows that for the most part, it works out. So why get myself in such a huff in the moment to moment when it's not looking the way that it should? And I'll tell you, this crone approach for me over this last year, it has made everything inside of launches so much more fun. It has made everything way less stressful. And of course, I'm not going to lie, there have been total moments where I've still had anxiety, where I've gotten stressed out, where, this and that, but it has just been so much decreased. And I'm just like enjoying my launches more. The other thing about this crone approach and not getting so stressed out and not getting so catastrophic and not making everything mean, oh my gosh, this is the end and it's not working, like all of that stuff. The other thing about it is taking the other approach, the crone approach, the like, this is how things play out. It allows me, number one, to maintain my energy during a launch. And number two, it allows me to keep on showing up, to not get defeated, to not get deflated, to not lose my curiosity. It allows me to show up, to continue to put, my stake in the ground for the message, for the impact that I'm trying to make. And it allows me to be more dynamic and creative inside of my launches, which is what launches need, this is what part of what live launches need is for you to be dynamic and creative, for you to see, okay, that didn't quite work. So instead of me just getting deflated and depressed, what about it didn't work? What can I do next in this launch? How do I need to shift the message? What was I not clear enough about? What needs to be said differently? What needs to be done differently? What do I need to have more patience with and see how it's going to play out, etc., etc., etc. So, one of the reasons why I chose this particular lesson out of so many that I wanted to share with you on today's episode at the beginning of the year is because I know my people, I know my listeners, and I know that many of you are doing the catastrophic thinking thing inside of your launches. You're making it mean everything. You're being really heavy about all of it. And then you may end up feeling super stressed or dejected, or you may end up making stories about your future success, or you simply just take yourself out of the game from the launch that you're in and you stop trying or you stop meeting the moment, and then it's not going to end up being successful. So I want to remind you that your job is to stay present during your launches, is for you to stay hopeful during your launches, is for you to continue to show up and to see them through, and to try not to be on the roller coaster so much. Because when you get on that roller coaster, then it's hard to see what needs to be seen in terms of course correction with a launch, or even to just be more patient to see your plan through. So I want to remind you to cackle like the crone inside of your launches. Remember that this too shall pass. And even if this launch just ends up not bringing in enough people or any people, remember there's always another way. There's always something else to try. There's always something else to do. There's always another plan. It doesn't mean anything about you or your future success. Okay, let's move on to the third lesson for today. And that lesson that I really got in 2025 is it's okay to really let yourself be supported and to ask for what you need. So I'll start here with this one. I am actually generally really good in lots of ways with receiving support and at asking certain people for what I need. John, my husband, is my rock. He is an incredible human. I really lucked out with him. And he's also a generous human. And I almost never hesitate to ask John for what I need, whether it's helping with the kids or running an errand or giving me extra love and attention when I'm upset, etc., etc. I'd also say I'm pretty good at delegating with my team and letting everyone on the team know what I need, of course, within reason of what's appropriate inside of a professional team. And inside of my friendships, to a big, big extent, I've always been a natural at sharing the hardest things with my friends and allowing them to see me in it and in the struggle. I have no problem with any of that. But that being said, when my mother died, I had some really big needs, specifically by way of needing to know that I was deeply loved and supported and seen as I moved through the first week in particular of my grieving and of all of the funeral, all the funeral rites and the Shiva rites in Jewish tradition. We sit Shiva for the first week after somebody dies. And I know that needing a lot of people around when you're grieving isn't the right thing for everyone who's grieving. I actually, right now, I have a close friend, a very close friend, who recently lost her mother, and she chose to have a very private funeral. It was just her and her aunt who attended, and nobody else. But for me, when my mother died, I recognized right away that it was going to be really important for me to have lots of people who loved me at my mother's funeral. And it kind of surprised me actually, because while I've always leaned on friendships to some extent for support, I've never felt like I needed the support, really. It's kind of been more of like a really nice perk of having good friendships. But this was the first time that I felt like I needed it. I needed the support. So it felt like a big deal to me to let my friends know that I really, really wanted them to show up for me, either for the funeral in New Jersey or for my friends who live in Charlotte to come to the Shiva at my house in Charlotte. And it felt like such a big ask for me. It's funny to even say out loud because I'd hop on a plane in an instant for any friend who needed me to be there for them for pretty much any reason. But back in April, when it came to asking, I don't know, I felt sheepish about it. I felt a little weird about it. I definitely felt hesitant to ask. Like, I don't know, like I didn't have the right or that I'd be burdening others or putting them out. And again, it's just so weird because I know that my friends love me so much, but I I I was feeling the stretch in it. But even though I was feeling the stretch, I was so clear that this was absolutely what I needed for myself. And of course, the truth is that I didn't even really have to make the ask from most of my friends. They just let me know before I even asked them that they would be there at the funeral, at the Shiva. And I can't even express fully in words what it meant to me and what it continues to mean to me that so many people showed up for me with such deep love. First of all, one of my besties from high school, she completely took over. I mean, I was in a daze in the days after my mother died. And so this bestie, she completely took over. She arranged all of the food and the logistics so that we would have food and drinks and everything that we needed at my parents' house for when people came over right after the funeral. This friend knew that neither my sister or I were in a state to organize anything. And she also knew that both my parents are only children. So we didn't really have any close family who could help. And this friend just showed up to support. She made it happen. And I allowed her, like, I just handed it over to her. I allowed myself to not be able to do. I am a superwoman usually in my life. I do all the things. I'm the one that takes care, and I just let her take over. And then after that, all of my besties, every single one of them from high school showed up, not only for the funeral, but also for every night of the Shiva in New Jersey. And it wasn't only that my high school friends showed up, their parents came and their siblings came to come and support me. One of my best friends from college flew out from Michigan for the funeral. My close friends from my women's circle, from my days in New York City came, my spiritual sisters, who even years after we all lived in the same area, we still circled up every week on Zoom during COVID. Those women came from Brooklyn and upstate New York and New Hampshire. My first ever boyfriend from when I was a teenager, who to this day is still one of my dearest and closest friends. He came in from Massachusetts, and his parents came to the funeral also, and on and on and on. And you know what? I let all of them, every single person who showed up for me, I let them support me. I let myself be held by them on the day of the funeral and in the days after the funeral. I really surrendered and I trusted that I could be seen and loved and held and taken care of even in my lowest moments. And I also trusted that I didn't have to do it all by myself. And then when I returned back to North Carolina, it was on the last day of Shiva. And I came back to North Carolina purposely from New Jersey before the end of Shiva because I still felt the need. I felt that it was really important to be seen and held and supported by my local friends as well, to have the evidence for myself that I was loved by my local community. It's funny, even though I've already lived here in Charlotte for over 13 years now, I still think of my Charlotte friends as my new friends. And even though there are so many parts of me that know they love me, I sometimes don't fully trust. As an aside on all of this, at some point, I want to do a whole podcast episode on entrepreneurship and friendship, and in friendship in general, because it's not always so easy to make friends as adults. And when we're busy entrepreneurs, I know it's a thing, and we'll do a whole podcast episode on it. But anyway, that night, my house in Charlotte was filled with over 60 people who came to support me. And the love that I felt on that night, it also made all of the difference for me. It got me through so much. Also, I do want to say that the outpouring of love after my mother died that I received from so many of my clients and my students, and from so many of you in the Coaching Revolution podcast community, that also meant the world to me. It was another thing that helped me get through the toughest of tough days and weeks and first months after my mom died. Ooh, I'm actually feeling a little teary-eyed right now, just feeling the gratitude. When all those people showed up, I really took the time to viscerally feel the love and support from each person who reached out and showed up. And, at other points in my life, I might have been embarrassed to say that I needed so much love from so many people. But the truth is that at that moment in my life, all of that love and support and validation of love, like all of that was truly exactly what I needed. And I'm so glad that I allowed myself to feel the need, and that I allowed myself to ask for what I needed, and that I allowed myself to feel the support. And there was another piece to all of this that was really huge for me. In addition to giving myself the permission to ask for support and receive support, I also gave myself permission to not respond to people right away. If I needed the space or I just didn't have the bandwidth or the capacity, I just didn't respond. And this was so big for me because I am a lifelong people pleaser. And even though I've come so far with the people pleasing over the decades, I've definitely gotten better. I will tell you, at age 50, I am still learning how to not abandon myself and my needs just to make other people feel comfortable. And in those days and weeks and months after my mother died, in the moments when I really just needed the space, when I just couldn't be with or speak to another person, I allowed myself to not respond to the texts, to not respond to the phone calls. And these were all of the same people, by the way, the same exact people who I had asked to come and be there for me for the funeral or the Shiva. And it was so huge for me to also take the space that I needed. All of this, the asking for what I need, the commitment to really taking in support from others, and the commitment to myself instead of people pleasing, all of this has made such a big impact on me. It's really changed me for the better. I feel deeper in my bones than ever before that I'm loved and that I have a true support system and that it's more than okay to need a support system sometimes. And for the rest of my life, and again, I'm tearing up saying this. I just feel so much emotion. For the rest of my life, when I remember those first days and months after my mother died, I'm going to remember the incredible grief, of course, but I'm also going to remember all of the love that was there for me. And oh, I am so, so grateful for it. Okay, so there you have it. Three lessons from 2025. And I'll tell you, it's so funny because when I first started writing this podcast episode, my intention was I had seven lessons that I wanted to share. And then as I started writing the episode, I realized that we were going to need many, many hours if I were going to share seven. But I promise I will work many of those other lessons into podcast episodes or newsletter articles this coming year. Now, if it feels right for you, I want to invite you to take some time to reflect on what some of your biggest lessons were in 2025. What did you learn that has been impactful or meaningful to you? What did you learn about yourself or your capacity or what works for you or what doesn't work for you? What were some of the lessons in your personal life? What were some of the lessons in your professional life? Every year, as part of my yearly review, one of the many pieces that I look at is what did I learn this last year? It's a way of honoring what I've been through, but it's also information for me to take forward, right? It's strategies. It's important stuff. So I really hope that you got exactly what you needed from the three lessons that I shared today and from our time today. And if you got value from this podcast episode, would you do me a favor? And actually, it's two favors. So first, if this episode was meaningful to you, I'd really, really love to hear from you. Shoot me an email. You can send it to info@applieddepthinstitute.com and let me know what was meaningful, what really touched you in this episode, what you loved, what you learned. And also, if you do that little exercise about exploring what your own lessons from 2025 are, I'd love to hear those too. Let me know. It would really mean so much to me to hear from you on any of this. And I will personally read each note that you send, and I will also write you back. The second favor, if you loved this episode or any of my podcast episodes, would you tell your friends about it? It is really the best way for me to get the word out and to share, what I'm trying to do here, which is to support practitioners, coaches, therapists, and humans to not only be the best practitioner that you can be, but to be the best human that you can be. And I don't mean by improving yourself, by the way. I mean by learning to love yourself more and love your experience more. So please, please share. Oh, and Curriculum Lab starts next week. So if you've been eyeing the Curriculum Lab, if you know that you are ready to articulate your thought leadership into a body of work, into a program, if you know that you are ready to level up your curriculum and your program to create transformational exercises inside of your programs, to shift things so that your people are more engaged and have better results inside of your programs, please, please join us. The Curriculum Lab is epic. It You will learn so much and you will get the curriculum work done in real time. All right, till next time, I am sending lots of love.